I used to think silence was safe, that if I could just stay quiet long enough, if I didn't say the wrong thing, if I didn't remember too loudly, the pain would stay buried. But pain doesn't die in silence. It waits. It waits in the quiet, in the still moments. In the middle of the night, when the world has gone to sleep and you left alone with the sound of your own breath. That night, the house was completely still. No cars, no voices, not even wind. Just me. And the echo of everything I didn't want to feel. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, light off, door closed, blanket wrapped tight around my shoulders like armor. But no blanket can protect you from the weight of what you've buried inside. At first, I told myself I was just tired, that it was just another long day, that maybe a warm shower or a good cry would help. But this was different. This silence wasn't rest. It was confrontation. It didn't come to soothe, it came to uncover. And I knew, deep down, that something was about to surface. I felt it in my chest, that ache you can't trace, the one that feels older than you are, as if you've been carrying something for years you don't remember picking up. I closed my eyes, trying to force calm, trying to escape whatever the silence was trying to say, but the silence wouldn't let go. It pressed in softly, but firmly, like it was asking me to listen. And underneath all the exhaustion, all the denial, all the carefully built defenses, I heard something I didn't expect. You're not okay. It wasn't a judgment. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. And it hit harder than any scream, because I had spent so long convincing myself I was fine, telling others I was just tired, telling myself I had healed, telling God I had moved on. But in that dark room, with nothing but the silence to keep me company, the truth I had refused to face finally spoke. I wasn't healed. I wasn't past it. And I wasn't okay. I was hiding, not from people, not from circumstances, from myself. And now, the silence wasn't letting me hide anymore. Se essa história tá te tocando, comenta aqui embaixo de onde você tá assistindo e que horas são aí. Because this story doesn't start with a breakthrough. It starts with the unbearable quiet that finally made space for the truth to speak. Locked away the versions of myself I couldn't bear to face and threw away the key, and the world kept clapping. Because brokenness is easy to overlook when it's wrapped in high-functioning survival. I became the one people leaned on. The one who always showed up. But what no one saw, what I didn't want anyone to see, was the cost of carrying all that silence. I avoided mirrors when I wasn't wearing a mask of strength. I avoided stillness because it left too much space for truth to creep in. And I avoided God, even when I said I wasn't. Because deep down, I was afraid that if he looked too closely, he'd see what I was hiding. Not some dramatic failure. Not some secret sin. Just the parts of me that felt too fragile to be seen. Too wounded. To not enough. I thought that if I could just keep moving, but truth doesn't stay buried. Not forever. And that night, in that room, I felt the walls of my own performance starting to shake. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. The way my hands fidgeted for no reason. The way my heart felt hollow, even though everything on the outside looked fine. The way the silence started to sound like questions I couldn't answer anymore. Who are you without the strength? What are you running from? When did you stop telling yourself the truth? I didn't have answers. I only had the ache. That slow, persistent ache of someone who knows they've been hiding in plain sight. And that ache wasn't going to stay quiet much longer, because God wasn't interested in the version of me I had curated. He was after the real me, the one I had locked away years ago, the one I didn't think was worthy of love, or healing, or light. And no matter how well I thought I had hidden her, he had always seen her. I used to think that ignoring the pain made me strong, that if I didn't talk about it, it would lose its power, that if I didn't cry over it, it would disappear, that if I didn't name it, it couldn't control me. But the truth is, what we refuse to face doesn't disappear. It just hides in places we eventually collide with, and I was running out of places to avoid myself. That night, the stillness didn't just surround me, it started pressing inward, like it was peeling back every layer I had built to stay functional. I shifted in bed, pulled the blanket higher, turned my face to the wall, like darkness could shield me from what I knew was coming. But nothing stopped it. Not the distractions, not the mental gymnastics, not the excuses I'd rehearsed 1,000 times. The silence was no longer passive. It was purposeful, and somewhere deep inside me, I felt the weight of a question I'd avoided for too long. What are you refusing to see? My throat tightened. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I did. I knew what I'd buried. The memories I pretended didn't shape me. The betrayals I minimized. The deep-rooted belief that somehow I was the reason for all the things that went wrong. I told myself I was over it. Told myself it wasn't that bad. Told myself God had forgiven me, so I should be able to forget. But I hadn't forgotten. I had hidden. And there's a difference, because forgetting doesn't haunt you. Hiding does. And that night, in the dark, I realized something I never wanted to admit. I wasn't afraid of what had happened. I was afraid of what it said about me. Afraid that if I looked too closely, I'd find a woman who wasn't worth loving. Afraid that if I pulled back the curtain, all I'd see was shame. Afraid that the silence wasn't just silence. It was agreement with the lie I'd lived in for years, that I was too much, and not enough, all at once. So I kept the door locked, even from myself. I told God I trusted him, but not with this, not with the place I couldn't even name, not with the part of me I had trained myself to avoid like poison. But that night, he wasn't asking for my performance. He was asking for my honesty, not the kind that looks good in prayer, the kind that shatters you. And for the first time, I felt the courage to stop pretending. Not because I was strong enough to face it, but because maybe he was. There's a kind of darkness that feels familiar, like the inside of a cave you've lived in for so long, you start calling it safety. I had been sitting in that kind of darkness for years. Not literal darkness, but the kind that wraps itself around your thoughts, the kind that lets you function during the day, but whispers at night. That night, it wrapped tighter than usual, but something felt different. The darkness didn't feel empty. It didn't feel like loneliness. It didn't feel like fear. It felt like something was there. Something waiting, not pacing, not pressuring, just present. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just the way the light from the hallway spilled across the carpet, or the way my heartbeat echoed in my ears. But it wasn't outside me. It was with me. And I remembered something I hadn't thought of in years. A verse I'd heard as a child. Even the darkness is not dark to him. It surfaced without permission, like it had been hiding somewhere inside me all this time. I sat up slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to miss whatever was happening. The room hadn't changed, but I had. I wasn't trying to run anymore. I wasn't trying to hide. Something was drawing me out, gently, but unmistakably. I closed my eyes, not to escape, but to see. And in that darkness, I saw something I'll never forget. A version of myself, small, silent, hidden in a corner. Not angry, not defiant, just waiting. She looked like someone who hadn't been spoken to in years, like someone who had accepted invisibility as safety. And for the first time, I realized I had been hiding from her. From the part of me that still felt the pain, from the girl who never got to tell her story, from the wounds I wrapped in silence and called strength. And then the presence moved closer. Not in sight, not in sound, but in knowing. As if God himself was sitting with me in that room, not to expose me in shame, but to uncover me in love. The kind of love that doesn't flinch at what it sees. The kind that stays. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because when God steps into the dark, you don't have to perform. You just have to let him see you. And I was ready. I didn't hear it out loud. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a dream. It was quieter than that. But somehow, I knew those words weren't mine. It's time to see what you buried. They came like breath, like someone exhaling beside me in the dark. Soft, but undeniable. And they didn't come to accuse me. They came to invite me. I sat perfectly still, like the air had shifted, like the moment had turned sacred. Because it had. I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I was afraid of what the light might show. But those words, they didn't carry judgment. They carried compassion. And I realized in that instant, this wasn't about exposure. It was about revelation. God wasn't trying to humiliate me. He was trying to heal me. I had spent years burying the pain. Not to lie, but to survive. I buried the girl who used to laugh without checking, who was watching, the one who dreamed out loud, the one who believed she was worthy before someone told her otherwise. I buried the anger, the grief, the deep ache of being overlooked. I buried the part of me that still hoped because hoping had hurt too much. And I buried all of it under schedules, responsibilities, I'm fine, and spiritual language that looked like surrender but was really. But God isn't fooled by polished silence. He waits, he watches, he stays. And when the moment is right, when your soul is quiet enough to listen, he whispers what you didn't know you needed to hear. It's time. Not to perform, not to impress, just to see. To finally bring into the light what was never meant to die in the dark. I let my mind go there. Not all at once, just a step. I thought about the day everything changed. The sentence that broke me. The absence I never healed from. I thought about the moment I learned to pretend. And it hurt. Not in a way that destroyed me, but in a way that told me I was still alive underneath it all. Ischuu, tender, still reachable. Still loved. The whisper came again this time, not with words, but with presence. I never left you. Even there. And in that moment, the darkness became something else. A place of encounter. A space where I didn't have to be strong. Where I didn't have to hide. Where buried things weren't resurrected to shame me, but to heal me. I always thought healing meant going forward. That it was about becoming someone new, stronger, better, more whole. But that night, I learned something different. Sometimes healing means going back, not to live there, but to rescue the part of you left behind. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. Not the dramatic ones. The subtle ones. The ordinary moments where something inside me quietly broke and no one noticed. A conversation. A silence that lingered too long. A look that said, you're too much or not enough. And then, I saw her. The version of me I had buried. She wasn't angry. She wasn't loud. She was sitting, arms around her knees, back against a wall, eyes tired. She didn't look like failure. She looked like someone who wasn't sure she deserved to be remembered. I don't know how long I had been avoiding her. Years, probably, because she reminded me of who I was before I learned to hide. Before I covered the pain with perfection. Before I learned that being needed felt safer than being known. I wanted to turn away. To close that door again. To go back to the version of me that had it all together. But I couldn't. Because that girl, the one I left behind, was still part of me. And healing couldn't happen until I stopped pretending she didn't exist. So I knelt beside her. Not physically, but in my heart. And I whispered something I didn't expect. I'm sorry. I was sorry for abandoning her. For silencing her. For thinking strength meant leaving her behind. For forgetting that wholeness isn't about denial, it's about integration. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because something in me shifted. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I wasn't ashamed. I saw her fully, and I stayed. And as I sat with her, I felt the presence return, stronger now, closer. God hadn't come to fix her. He had come to remind me. This is the part of you I've been waiting for. The one I thought disqualified me? The one I thought made me unworthy. The one I buried under years of survival and silence. But he saw her, and he loved her, not because she was healed, but because she was honest. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to move on from her. I wanted to move forward with her. I always thought the truth would break me, that if I ever opened the box, the one where I'd stored all the pain, all the shame, all the things I didn't want to face, I wouldn't survive what came out. But I was wrong. The truth didn't break me. It met me, and it didn't look like punishment. It looked like peace. Not the kind that comes from everything making sense, but the kind that comes from no longer running. That night, I stopped hiding, not because I figured it all out, but because I finally believed God wasn't afraid of what he'd find inside me. And if he wasn't afraid, why should I be? I sat in the stillness for what felt like hours. No music, no noise, no pretending. Just me and God and the truth between us. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't poetic. It was raw, unpolished, real. But it was also holy, because the moment you tell the truth to the one who already knows it, something unlocks inside you. And that's what happened. I stopped hiding the thoughts I had learned to silence. I feel forgotten. I don't know how to forgive myself. I'm tired of being the strong one. I don't know who I am without the pain. I laid it all bare, and the silence didn't judge me. It held me. Because God doesn't heal what we pretend isn't there. He heals what we're willing to reveal. And in that moment, I finally understood, truth isn't a weapon. It's a doorway. It's not there to expose you. It's there to bring you home. I looked around the room, same walls, same shadows, but it felt different now. Because I wasn't just in a dark room, I was in a sacred space. A space where the worst parts of my story were no longer secrets. They were stories God was rewriting line by line, with grace in every sentence. The version of me I had feared wasn't someone to run from. She was someone to embrace. And the truth I thought would disqualify me. It became the place where I finally felt safe, Safi, to be seen. Safe to be known. Safe to be healed. Not later. Now. I didn't flip the light switch. There was no need, because something brighter had already broken into that room, not with bulbs or lamps or sunlight, but with truth. And truth, when it comes with love, brings its own kind of light. I sat still, legs crossed on the bed, blanket draped over my shoulders like a cloak, watching the silence do what no voice could. Remind me that darkness doesn't always mean abandonment. Sometimes it means incubation. Sometimes it means something sacred is unfolding before your eyes. And that's what was happening. Something sacred was unfolding, not in the world around me, but in the space within me I had locked for years. The light that entered didn't expose me to shame. It exposed me to mercy. I saw the pieces of myself I had called weak, and for the first time, I saw them as worthy. I saw the thoughts I had kept hidden, and realized they were not too much for God. I saw the pain I had tried to forget, and understood it was not a curse, but the very place where love had been waiting to meet me. He had been there all along. In every moment I tried to numb, in every memory I tried to delete. In every version of myself I tried to deny. He had been sitting in the dark with me, not rushing me, not scolding me, just waiting. Waiting for me to stop performing. Waiting for me to breathe. Waiting for me to finally believe I didn't have to do this alone. And as I sat in the softness of that night, I felt it. Not everything had changed, but I had. I was no longer afraid of what I would find in silence, because silence had become the place where I heard him best. I stood slowly, not because I was ready to move on, but because I was ready to move forward, with nothing hidden, with nothing buried, with nothing held back. I opened the door of that room. Not just physically, but symbolically, because now the place that once felt suffocating felt sacred. That room didn't stay dark forever. It became the place where the light found me and stayed. There's something I didn't realize until long after that night ended. Something that still brings tears to my eyes when I think about it now. I thought that night was about facing the truth, about confronting what I had buried, about finally being honest with myself and with God. But it was also something more. It was the night I discovered that God doesn't show up after the healing. He shows up in the hiding, in the fear, in the shame, in the quiet corners of our soul where we think no one would want to look. He wasn't waiting for me to open the door. He was already inside the room, already sitting beside the version of me I had abandoned, already loving the parts I thought made me unlovable, already whispering the truth before I was brave enough to hear it. You don't have to be afraid of what is in you because I am already here. The healing didn't come through loud miracles or dramatic encounters. It came through the kind of light that only appears when everything else is still, when the distractions stop, when the noise fades, when there's nowhere left to run. That's where I found him. Or maybe that's where I finally saw he had always been. And now, every time I feel the weight of silence pressing in again, I don't panic, I don't run, I listen, because I know what silence can hold. It can hold presence. It can hold truth. It can hold the kind of mercy that doesn't ask you to clean up only to come closer. So if you're here, in the middle of a night, that feels unbearable. In the middle of a silence that feels like it's closing in. Maybe the truth isn't that God is far. Maybe the truth is that He's finally close enough for you to hear. You don't need to fear the light that reveals. Because when it's His light, it doesn't come to expose you. It comes to free you. What you buried is not too much for Him. And neither are you.